So happy Friday, everyone. So appreciative of you lending Friday time. It is hard to come by these days, so I appreciate you all putting us on your calendar. A special thanks to my panelists, Michael Malcom and Erik Murray, for also sharing not only their Friday time, which is very valuable, but also their insight and knowledge into what social equity is in this cannabis industry, what it was meant to be and what it really is or isn't. There's a lot to be learned here that will not be uncovered in a 60-minute session, but we'll try to uncover as much as we can. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I will be watching for that. And then to stay updated and to watch the recording and or share the recording of this session, go to lastprisonerproject.org, sign up for our newsletter, and you will receive, I promise, not too many emails, but certainly the email that includes this session. So to not take up much of your time, I will start with a brief description, or let's say Google definition, of what social equity is, and then I'll do introductions, and then we'll just dive right in. And so according to my Google definition, the goal of the Cannabis Social Equity Program is to recognize and address the long-term impact that federal and state cannabis enforcement policies have had on low-income communities across the country. Equity programs are designed to support equal opportunities in the cannabis industry by making legal cannabis business ownership and employment opportunities more accessible to low-income individuals and communities most impacted by the criminalization of cannabis. And so to start with introductions, my name is Evelyn LaChapelle, the reentry coordinator here at Last Prisoner Project, and also someone most impacted by the criminalization of cannabis. After spending 87 months in prison, I just spend my days advocating not only for the growth of this plant, but for decriminalization and the release of the folks who are still in prison. A part of that job, or a part of my role in this industry, is also education, right? Like educating myself and educating others, because I believe that that is the key here, which is why I have two of my favorites. So I will start with you, Erik, if you could give a brief introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn. Appreciate you letting us join, and definitely appreciate all the work that you're doing. You know, I think we've seen just sharing, and the folks hearing your story is powerful, right? Because we're here to talk about what is social equity, and social equity was meant to find ways to cure the harms of the war on drugs, and no one has seen and felt those harms more directly, more acutely than you have. So anyways, thank you for hosting. Thank you for allowing me to join. Excited to have this chat with you and Michael. My name is Erik Murray. I wear several different hats. And so Evelyn, you know certainly how busy I am and how busy all of us are. I mean, just trying to navigate all of the nuances and the red tape and the capital. And I mean, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different challenges and issues, but I'm fortunate to be the leader of several great teams. We started a company called Oak Investment Funds in 2015. This small Black-owned Oakland-based cannabis real estate company, you know, really through a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, the support of investors, became one of the largest cannabis real estate owners in the Bay Area, which, because we were blessed with the geography of Oakland, California, and because folks like Councilwoman Desley Brooks said, time out, there's a legal industry that's being formed while people of color predominantly are affected by cannabis prohibition, we have to right that wrong. So social equity was born here in Oakland, California. We're obviously going to talk about that later today, but because we were the largest cannabis real estate owner, we also are one of the largest supporters and incubators and partners for social equity applicants here in the Bay Area. So that's one of our roles. And then I'm also very fortunate to lead a team that I'm even more excited about than the real estate. Let's call it what it is. The real estate was a means to an end. But we started a company called Rosemary Jane, and Rosemary Jane set out to take the learnings that we saw from our real estate business, the learnings that we saw, thank you, Ev, the learnings that we saw from being in Oakland and trying to help meaningfully participate and support in social equity. And then quite frankly, where we saw a lack of Cannabis Capital, the MSOs, others. You know, a lot of people, we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, want to performatively talk about social equity, but not do it. And we looked at ourselves and said, we really need to do more than just be a landlord. We have all of the ingredients. We know the partners. We know social equity. We really care about solving this problem. You know, I tell everyone I have become much more of an activist than I used to be. And Evelyn, after hearing your story, it's not hard to know why I've become such an activist. It's just screwed up what cannabis prohibition has done to our community. So Rosemary Jane is a cannabis retailer that set out to certainly be one of the dominant social equity, social impact, ethos-driven cannabis companies in the country. But before we do that, we have to get stores open in the Bay Area first. And we'll talk about the challenges 3-4 years later, still trying to get stores open. But just very fortunate to lead both of those teams and excited to be part of the convo. So
yes,
thank you.
Thank you. And Michael, a lot to follow up after. I know.
I know. Yeah. Salute to you, Erik, man. That was inspiring just listening to you speak. So salute to you and Evelyn, of course. You know, we've spoken several times before. Just like Erik said, I'll echo him. You know, your story is one that's just so impactful. You know, and I know last time we spoke before, I always say, like, you know, I'm a social equity applicant. I qualify as social equity here in Illinois because I have a cannabis conviction on my record, but I spent a few hours in prison, right? Like, so I'm always conscious of, you know, even that conversation.
A few hours too long.
Yeah, true. But even still, I'm always conscious of that as well. Like, you know, when I'm talking about either something like social justice and reform when it comes to the laws, that there are people that didn't just get slapped on the wrist. Like a lot of people I know just got slapped on the wrist, but there's some people that serve some hard time, you know, for a non-violent offense, you know, so that, and in addition to, you know, the whole medical aspect as well, you know, like I said, I'm fortunate enough to be somewhat normal and not needed like I know some other people do. So you know, those two things I always try to keep in mind when I'm having these conversations. But yeah, just briefly about myself, my name is Michael Malcom. I love Erik's background with real estate. I'm a realtor here in Chicago. I've been working in real estate since I was out of high school. But I do a few things in the cannabis industry. I'm a social equity applicant. Recently applied for put 10 applications in for dispensaries here in Illinois. I also work as a consultant. I work with companies around the country on everything from product development to marketing and advertising to license acquisition to community engagement. I also am the founder of the We Travel Food brand. I'm also a partner in the Karanja Culture brand based out of LA. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Olive Harvey College here in Chicago, currently teaching cannabis marketing and branding. So
I love it. We both clapped at We Food Travel because I love We Food Travel. If you haven't checked it out, please wefoodtravel.com. I almost said it, but WTF is how I remember travel. And talk about transferable skills. I have two real estate guys on the line right now, right? And talk about like really being able to push forward in this industry and how this industry is really based off of networking skills and the ability to sell, right? Both that are important in the real estate industry as well as the cannabis space. So thank you both for lending time out of your very busy schedules. And so you guys both have a lot going on. So I'll jump right in. And this first question, I'll be honest, a little selfish. It was for my own needs to know, right? Because I'm learning that these conversations are teaching me maybe more than the audience. So I'm here to learn. But when we're talking social equity applications, most of us are thinking dispensary ownership, period. That is it. Do these same programs apply throughout the entire supply chain, right? Distribution, manufacturing, et cetera, in your respective locations? So Erik, primarily, I guess we can talk about California, although I know you've got your hands across the board, but in California, and then the same for you, Michael, in Illinois, are there opportunities for social equity licensing throughout the supply chain?
Yeah, great question. And you're right. It does vary varies drastically in a number of ways from coast to coast. So most of my comments are going to be specific to California and specific to the social equity markets within California. I mean, that's something else you have to realize. There's still only a handful of jurisdictions that are prioritizing social equity. You know, some cities are prioritizing, are you local? Are you politically connected? Some cities and states even change the definition of social equity. That's why I was listening very closely when you read that definition of social equity, because we've seen in places where, let's just face it, the broader you make that definition, the less it cuts to the core of really helping people who were formerly incarcerated or justice impacted by the war on drugs, period, right? So different places say that's, you know, but whether that's based on zip code or other things, at a fundamental level, you have to have that definition. But the answer to your question, in California, we don't have enough time to go through all of the craziness that's happening nationally. But yes, in San Francisco and Oakland, California, which are the two leading Bay Area jurisdictions issuing licenses via social equity, the social equity status applies across all license types. And so whether you're a retailer, a cultivator, a distributor, delivery, you do get to take advantage of social equity benefits around priority licensing, around eligibility for grants, around incubation eligibility, which means that another company or landlord pays your rent for a period of time. That's not only applicable to retail. That does apply if you want to start a cultivation, a manufacturing, a distribution, and delivery. Having said that, I think the reality is the reason why we talk a lot about retail and delivery as social equity license types is both of those, everything about this industry takes so long and requires so much money. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about cultivation and manufacturing, the upfront expense of capitalizing a cultivation business at scale that you really need to be at to compete, you're talking about millions of dollars. So a lot of times social equity does get pigeonholed into delivery, which you can do with, you know, one car, one person, one little shop, or retail. If you can find a landlord that's not crazy, that's willing to lease to us, we'll talk about that later if you want. It's easier to stand up a retail or delivery business than the millions of dollars of build out it costs. But social equity status, at least in California, for the most part, does apply across all license types.
That was a good point, because even when we're thinking retail, we're thinking cost, right? Like, and we will get to cost, because cost is crazy even for the application. But yeah, so yes, it's available. It's gonna cost you more. And Mike or Michael?
Mike is fine.
Mike is
yeah,
fine. Okay.
Yeah, Mike is fine. I'm not too uptight about it. No,
Okay.
No, but so Illinois is I'll give them a little bit of slack before I just completely butcher them. We're at the beginning stages right now. So the only license types that were available right now for social equity are retail, craft grow, which is limited to 5,000 square feet. Mm. And transportation, which is not delivery. It's B2B, it's not B2C. And infusion license or processing licenses. Mm-hmm. Those were also available, but there's no distribution here. There is no, because there's not enough cultivators here, and there is no, there's no delivery licenses available. It's some of the same things that Erik was saying, though, just spot on, though, like you said, about the startup cost. That was one of the main reasons why I just decided to concentrate initially on dispensary and retail. I can sell weed, you know, so I knew if all that is a storefront, you know, as a realtor, I know how to find those and get those built out. So I just thought it was better use of my time to do that. Also, you know, again, like I said, I really feel like the state of Illinois handicapped so many of the license types, like the transportation licenses, where it's B2B, it's not B2C. So how do you make money? How is that a business? So there's already, those businesses already exist. You know, at that point, you're talking about transportation or a security type company like Brinks type of thing. That's basically what that is. And, you know, I don't know how profitable that is. I'm not going to say anything, but I didn't even go after those. And then again, craft grow is capped at 5,000 square feet, where you have MSOs, cultivation centers here that are like 200,000. So like, you think you're gonna compete against them? I think it's possible, but like I said, they just, so I'll leave it at that for right now. Like, I'll keep digging in a little more.
Erik has this awesome, I don't know if I don't know what to call it, but group economics, right? So we know it's possible. We'll just have to get together and get it done. But I'm going to backtrack for a second because as I insert myself in this conversation, realizing that the conversation about social equity programming or the link to those of us impacted, right, is very slim. I came home. I had been home for a few months from prison. I was invited to speak on a panel. I'm on a panel with For the Movement, Steve D'Angelo, Al Harrington, like some big hitters. And then they're like, but are you going to apply for social equity? And I have no idea what they're talking about. I don't know what a social equity program is. I've spent 87 months in prison and no one has said, hey, Evelyn, did you know? Right. And I learned on a panel. And so my question to you, and I'll start with you, Mike, is how did you learn about social equity? Like, what was the first introduction to the programming?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think the way that I really learned about it was just because I'm a member of Chicago Normal. I think that's how I actually found out. I was just really trying to think about that, how I actually found out. But what made me apply was because I knew about it, but I wasn't necessarily planning on applying because I know it's Illinois and nothing is Illinois politics. So I didn't really feel confident that everything was going to be on the level anyway. But what made me apply was that I had a MSO that asked me to be a brand ambassador for them. This was in 2019, but they said that they couldn't pay me money. They could only pay me in weed. All right. And I was like, I don't know about that. And so I told them, I said, well, since you can't pay me in money, why don't you help me write my application and apply for licenses? And they agreed. And that's how I ended up applying. So I knew about it, but I didn't want to waste my money doing it.
Right.
But since this other company said that they would partner with me and spend their money to do it, and I didn't have to, and I would be the majority owner of the company, I just made sure that my paperwork was tight, and that's what I did. I applied.
Let's talk about asking for what you need, right? Like that is also key. I'm telling you, I learned from these conversations if no one else does. It's asking for what you need. And then Erik, the same for you. Like before I get to you, Erik, name the organization that introduced you to.
Oh yeah, Chicago Normal.
Chicago.
Yeah, Normal is the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws. Shout out to Edie, Gabe, Akile, and everybody on the team.
Because
there's great resources here in Illinois.
Yeah, these are really the folks, these sort of grassroots organizations that are doing the work to inform us. It's not really the industry. It's not the MSOs. It's not the billion-dollar industry that is saying, hey, you all have opportunities. It is grassroots organizations that are saying these are the opportunities that has been written into the policy that have been kept a secret. So Erik, how did that sort of come to your table?
Yeah, so interestingly, and it is great that both Michael and I come from a real estate background. I got into the industry from a real estate perspective, right? So in 2015, we started buying buildings as Oakland was defining their green zone. We started buying buildings in Oakland so that we could upgrade the power, upgrade the security, and be ready to cultivate. And in 2016-ish, Councilwoman Desley Brooks stood up at a city council meeting and said, time out. We are not about to let this go down this way. The Oakland Riders, a famous police gang, if anybody's watching and has not heard the Oakland Riders, I'll be honest, I did not grow up in Oakland. I had not heard of the Oakland Riders, so go Google it. What I'm about to say is going to sound made up until you go Google it. The Oakland Riders were a police gang. I think one of them, Frank Vasquez, who led the gang, is actually still on the FBI's most wanted list, but basically went around for decades terrorizing Black and brown neighborhoods in their police beats in Oakland. planting drugs on Black and brown folks so that they could up their arrest stats, incarcerate us, take away our rights. And so Desley said, time out. We are not going to watch the legal industry go down in this city with that history without social equity. And so, again, I know other places will claim to be the birthplace of social equity, but in cannabis, we feel like in Oakland, California in 2016, we saw that movement happen. So Oakland created the first social equity programs, as best as I can tell. They said, let's look at the police beats where that kind of activity went on. It was no surprise. It was the poor Black and brown neighborhoods where Frank Vasquez and these bad cops went around doing this. And so that's really when, again, I told you, I wasn't always as much of an activist as I've become, right? I mean, Michael and I will talk about this all the time. Being in real estate, we do look around and we're like, damn, this brokerage company's full of old white dudes. The bankers are all old white dudes. Like, we knew that there was inequity there. And fortunately, Michael and I and many others are doing as best as we can to get opportunities like this for people who look like us. But what I remind people is cannabis industry took it to a whole nother level, right? Just because we've been excluded from banking and real estate, we weren't also in prison. I wasn't in prison for trying to be a broker. Right. Evelyn was in prison. And you actually, let's not even go there because you actually weren't even selling cannabis. But anyways, just the double standard, the realization of that double standard combined with Desley Brooks and the Oakland City Council saying we have to stop this was when we learned about social equity in 2016. And so then, fast forward as the years went on, we saw what Michael's talking about. The MSOs would come in and say, well, we want to lease space from you, but we need, because Oakland said, sorry, guys, you have to have a social equity partner. Then they all wanted to talk about social equity, and then they came in. So that's really how social equity got started, 2016, 17 in Oakland, California.
And you were right there when it happened. It wasn't even like like you heard it when the lady said, this is not okay, especially in Oakland. I love that. And so jumping right into Oakland, because we are considered to be one of the places that got it right. I hear it all the time. I don't know the ins and outs of it. That's why we're having this conversation. But it is something that is said repeatedly, is Oakland has set a model that could be mimicked. Do you agree with that? And can you tell us, if you do or you don't, and why?
Boy, that's a hard one. Let me put it this way. No, we have not yet figured out the sweet spot for social equity, right? So there's not yet, in my opinion, a perfect program. I appreciate the regulators in the various states and cities that are trying to take what one city did and tweak it. I think Oakland's program is better than most. I think that as we work with the regulators like Greg Minor and Nancy Marcus and the folks in Oakland, the one thing is they've really been there since the beginning, right? And so they got to watch these laws be created. You've got Lanice Martin at the Hood Incubator, who's on the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. So Oakland politicians listen to folks like Lanice and the Hood Incubator. And so I do think Oakland did a lot of things right, but I still think the structural barriers have not been solved, right? If you can't get access to a property, if a, call it what it is, a racist landlord won't lease to you, the policies won't solve that. If there's not enough grant money, Oakland has done a great job of distributing, I want to say, $2 million of property purchase grants, which helped solve the first problem I mentioned, and roughly $5-6 million of state of California grants for equity businesses. But they're metering that money out in $5,000 to $10,000 chunks. You still have to go through layers and layers of red tape. And so to Michael's point, is $5,000 really going to let me compete with an MSO? Probably not. And so there's still a lot of structural barriers that exist, but I'll give Oakland credit. They did a good job of getting stakeholders involved in the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, that gave them some good ideas. To me, what I tell all these cities and states is just reduce the red tape, right? Like, seriously, the fact that I have to get 17 different sign-offs from 17 different departments. What we know about a lot of bureaucrats is bureaucrats, don't really like to go out on a limb ever. So their natural inclination is just like, well, I don't know if I can sign that permit card yet. Let me wait. Well, guess what, guys? The longer things take and the more hurdles you have to jump over benefits one party. That is the guys with deep pockets. You have to have deep pockets to take years and years to get through processes. And so that is the one thing that I think Oakland hasn't even figured out is how do we eliminate all of this red tape around, but they're working on it. I think one great thing that Greg Miner did, I want to give him credit. I don't want to be negative. I think a lot of these folks are working hard. We won't talk about the theory that I have about some jurisdictions and about some operators that realize that social equity is a moat around existing businesses, right? So I do think that some places are using social equity for nefarious purposes, and we need to call them out on that. But for the folks who at least are well-intentioned about social equity, as I believe Oakland is, there's still just too much red tape, and it takes so long. And until they fix that, it's not. But Oakland did do one thing. I will leave everybody with one tidbit. Thank you, Greg Miner. Thank you, Cannabis Regulatory Commission, Lanice, Ramon Garcia at Equity Trade, Nina Parks, everybody who had a hand in that. They basically said, look, we understand that in order to get your final license, you have to have millions of dollars and build out your facility to all these specs, but we will give you an interim provisional and we will give you a compliance plan. So like if you're working on your grow, you have a small grow, you don't have everything perfect the way that 28 different departments want to sign off, but you're showing that you're making progress. We're not going to shut your business down. We're going to work with you to improve it. So again, that's an example of where Oakland has said, we're going to try to eliminate some of this red tape.
Right. That is a piece that I would like to see adopted in more places. And I love that you touched on these grants, right? What is $5,000 and $10,000 building a business? I promise it will barely get you a brand deck, let alone real estate and staff, et cetera. And so that is a continuous problem, right? Like this funding and cost. And so Mike's sort of the same question for you because
thank you for asking me.
Right, I'm coming. Illinois.
I'm chomping at the bit at this one.
I know, but you guys are new, right? And so Oakland, like Erik said, we're talking 2016, 15. I will mention that I was still in prison while these things are happening, but it's new there. And so please tell us about how they have implemented their social equity and what you think about it.
Well, thank you for asking. No, Illinois, no. So let me just go back to what you said from the very beginning, what was defining social equity, right? So the way that we say it here in Illinois is social equity is defined as trying to address people who have been directly impacted by the war on drugs. So just keep that in mind, right? The directly impacted by the war on drugs. I've heard several people describe it in that way. Illinois social equity is about helping people who have either been directly impacted get in the industry or, get their records expunged or whatever it is that they're trying to do. That's what the social equity, right? Okay. So one of the first issues here in Illinois was that when they released the applications for the dispensary rounds, the only way that you can score 100% of the available points is if you had a veteran that was 51% owner and controller of your company. Which in my case automatically
veteran, like a war.
Yeah, like actual, yes, you served in the military. And again, I hate that I have to say this anytime that I have to make this argument. I have nothing against vets. My father is a Marine. My cousins are active duty. A lot of friends in the military. A lot of my business partners are former Marines. Like nothing against the veterans. And I think they should have their piece as well. But again, this law was intended for people that were directly impacted by the war on drugs. And I'm not to say vets weren't, but it shouldn't be so that 51% of the company has to be owned by a vet for you to be able to get 100% of the available points. So that's such an issue here that I'm still in the running for my licenses because there are several lawsuits pending right now, and the judge is trying to rule whether or not that's even constitutional.
Right.
I don't see how they approve it, but I'm moving like I'm not gonna get it. It wouldn't surprise me, but that's the number one issue. Just to give an example of what that means, like for the craft grow licenses, the state of Illinois gave out 40 craft grow licenses. All 40 licenses are majority owned by veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So then that leads you to, well, how do they define social equity here in Illinois, right? Social equity is defined by three different ways. Either you have a cannabis conviction on your record. Now, one of the issues with that is that you can't have too much cannabis on your record. Like if you have a felony, or say like done time like you, Evelyn, I'm not so sure that if you were arrested here in Illinois that you would that would even qualify for you, because like if you were arrested for a certain amount, you don't qualify. You can't apply for the cases. So that doesn't make any sense. And then the other way that you could qualify as social equity is zip code. They have the disproportionately impacted areas. The problem with that is that Chicago, just like Oakland, just like so many other places, are gentrified, right? I'm a realtor here. I know I look at these neighborhoods that they qualified as disproportionately impacted, and I'm like, it's $1 million condos, like $1 million condos all through there.
Being honest, right.
It makes no sense. And then, so that's bad, right? And so I also think that once they still haven't run all the numbers yet, but I'm pretty sure just based off of the people that applied, the majority of people that are going to win these licenses are qualified for social equity based off of where they live, not because they have criminal records. So I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying I don't know if that is really in the spirit of what the law was intended to do, right? Which was people that were directly impacted by the war on drugs. They didn't say based off of where you live. Like that wasn't the caveat to it. So that was the thing. And then the other thing that Illinois did, just to show you again how crazy they were, is another way that you can qualify for social equity here is, let's say you, Erik, you live in California and you want to apply for licenses in Illinois, and you say, hey, Mike, you live in Illinois. I'm going to create a company, and as long as 51% of your employees live in that disproportionately impacted area, your company is a social equity company.
Yep.
So people from all over this country, people from all over this country have been applying in Illinois, and they basically just use people. We call it the slave master clause here. They basically just use people for their zip codes. And like I said, I don't even blame the people who did it for doing it. I blame the state, because they are the ones who created that. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. And now they're trying to address it. And, it's a whole lot of stuff going on. They're doing, more lotteries and adding licenses. It's a whole thing. But it's like, it was, I hear over and over and over again here that they did their best. They did. Either they did or they are terrible at what they do.
Their best. Are their best just low on the Richter scale? And that sort of opens the door for like these predatory type situations, right? And I know Erik can speak to that, because that is how most of this industry is operating on the social equity side, right? But it is finding partners who are not out, really just buying you. I think this slave owner master sort of analogy is ownership, right? Like, so I will, and you guys jump in, but I, as an MSO, can create my social equity company, get some social equity partners, 50% are, impacted. And then I can just buy you out and now you're gone, right? And so you're not getting sort of that generational wealth and that equity. And so finding a partner like Erik, I'll let him speak to it, who's just so passionate about making sure that those opportunities go to folks who have really been impacted, right? Like, that's going to be the difference that I would like the audience to know, is that, yes, this is definitely a terrible situation, how it was built, right? But there's room to grow in it if you have partners who are making sure that they are holding up to the correct definition of social equity, is what I think I'm saying there. So Erik, did you anything to add on these predatory type relationships?
No, I mean, and to Michael's point, there's a lot of blame to go around. I mean, you could blame the state and the cities and the jurisdictions, licensing agencies for creating that system and enabling those loopholes or perpetuating some of those loopholes. You could certainly blame the MSOs and operators that aren't going about it the right way. Look, I mean, business folks would argue, you know, my fiduciary obligation as a business is to make as much money for my shareholders. And so if the state let me do it, then, you know, so what if I took advantage of somebody, I took their zip code. But I think as business owners, we have to also, you know, be ethically driven and accountable to looking in the mirror and being like, damn, you know, if you're the CEO of an MSO and the tables were turned, how does that really feel to you? And so that's one of the things that we let drive our decisions is like, you know, you treat people the way you want to be treated. But, you know, I do blame some of the businesses that are so ready to participate in those predatory schemes, you know, and then I think also, I think consumers, right? And it was amazing to me how many customers will still walk into our dispensaries and not realize that 40,000 people, probably more than that, honestly, because we're talking about 40,000 unjustly incarcerated directly tied to cannabis, right? But Evelyn knows all too well that there are probably hundreds of thousands because cannabis is just the gateway to incarceration. Everybody's like, oh, it's a gateway drug. Yeah, it's a gateway for police to pull you over and violate your civil rights. What they end up charging you with or incarcerating you for. So the numbers are probably in the hundreds of thousands, but there are at least 40,000 unjustly incarcerated folks. And I think I'm surprised even at consumers that don't realize it. So certainly the state should know better. And we as activists need to force our politicians to write better laws and policies. And we're going to talk here at the end about kind of the 5 or 6 takeaways that I have as we talk about social equity to try to solve some of these things. But then I think also businesses need to be responsible. You are making money. If you are a cannabis, if you're in the cannabis industry, you are making money today legally on the back of predominantly, not exclusively, right? I have to be careful because there are also some white folks that went to prison over this shit too. But over predominantly 4 times higher if you're Latino, up to 10 times higher if you're Black, likelihood to go to prison over this. And so to me, to be in this industry, we just said, if we are going to be making money here, we have to be authentic about giving back to social equity. And the key word of equity is equity. It's not social buyout. It's not social. Here's free weed, whatever they offered you, Michael. It's not, it is equity. We deserve to have equity in these businesses. And we're going to talk about that too, you know, if we even have time, because I think that equity is important, but ability to access equity is also important. And some jurisdictions have gone too far the other direction, and you'll get equity, but it comes with golden handcuffs, which then encourages additional predatory structures. It's complicated, but I think I've taken enough time. Let me turn that over I want to be like Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
You know what I did? I just want to add something real quick to this. Just to twist the knife in the Illinois conversation a little more. And I think it's really something that people in states that are coming online can look to as things that maybe they should not do. Like you said, talk to your legislators before all of this stuff happens. One of the other issues here in Illinois is that, number one, licenses, the way that it was set up was that the state allowed people to put in an unlimited amount of applications. So you put in an unlimited amount of applications for limited amount of licenses. They were initially only giving out 75 licenses, but then they also allowed those companies to win multiple licenses in that limited license round. So again, what does that mean? That means that the people that are going to the most benefit from this are the people who pay the most money. It was a cash grab for the state of Illinois. And then the last thing I just want to put the button on it is that, because I heard Erik mention it earlier, is that the transfer of licenses. And here in Illinois, there's no restrictions on who the licenses can be sold to. So even though you might have won the license as a social equity, you can sell it to an MSO, you can sell it to whoever. There is no holding period. It doesn't have to stay. So again, the goal, and that's what I'm starting to see here a lot now, is we go through this process is, there won't be that much diversity here in Illinois when it's all said and done, because all these out of town operators, the ones who aren't already here, they're just trying their best to buy up licenses here now. So they're making it hard even for the people who I know here who want to operate, because they're like, man, how do I say no to $10 million? Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know.
I always tell folks, so if they're offering you 10 million, know that it's got to be worth 20, right? But that's just in life and in everything. But we've all played bingo before, right? So when you are talking about this process, that's what I'm thinking about. So it's like, how many applications can I afford? I'm going to throw into the bingo box, right? And then how many licenses can I win? Also all in the bingo box, right? And then we're pulling out these names, let's say randomly, but that's not how bingo works. Bingo is only supposed to be one letter and one number ball, and that's it, right? There's never going to be a duplicate. So what is the cost? Like, just, I know you had 10 applications in and you negotiated a great rate, but what is the cost of one application there?
One application was $2,500. And just about with your bingo analogy, when the state did the lottery for the MSOs in January 2020, I was in the room when the state gave the current operator, the medical operators, their second locations for recreational. They did their lottery just bingo style, just like you said, in front of cameras, in front of people, live audience. I was in the room, reporters, everybody was there. When they did it for social equity, they did a digital lottery behind closed doors, no pictures, no video of anything that happened. The state just released the name of winners.
No, but what happened to bingo, guys? Like, all of a sudden, nobody's playing bingo anymore. And that's the look at social equity that I really sort of wanted to highlight, is that there are absolutely some successes. But this is not an easy battle, and should be something that we talk about often, right? Absolutely pushing for the release of 40,000 people. That's policy, that's legislation. But as we are pushing for the release, how are we pushing for the support of? And I think social equity is one of the many ways, but I didn't know that they did 2 lotteries and then the other one was a secret. Like, no one's speaking about this stuff, right?
No, all the lotteries. Well, just to be clear, the lottery that was in 2020, January 2020, that was only for MSOs. That was only for current operators, medical operators, which are all MSOs here in Illinois, to get a second location. They did lotteries this year that were all social equity. They did 3 lotteries. All lotteries were hidden. Mm-hmm. Nobody saw anything. They just released names, and that's who won.
That's who won. Hopefully someone's listening. I know, Erik, no one's listening, I know. Erik, you have some takeaways, right? Like, there are some ways that this is working and obvious ways that it is not working. What are some of those takeaways?
Yeah, well, I guess, and before I get to that, I do want to touch on, there's 2 very different licensing schemes, if you will. The easiest way to differentiate, one being competitive, where you have to go apply. Those are much, much more expensive, and lottery. So lottery, nice in a sense that it's much cheaper. You pay a fee to get your lottery ball. You don't have to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars writing an application that's 50 to 1,000 pages long. But there are different licensing schemes that drive different costs. They have pros and cons. On one hand, a lottery is a lottery, or at least it should be a fair, everybody just has their ball in a hat. You do ask the question, let's think about this. We all had equal chances of winning, but everybody that won seems to be connected to the mayor or governor. How did that happen? I don't know, but anyways, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. Let me be clear. But I think that question has to be asked, particularly, I'm an outsider looking in Illinois, but that was kind of fishy as I saw it, Michael. But nonetheless, I think that in California and in other places where we have a lot more competitive licensing, again, give kudos to Oakland where kudos is due. Oakland said, your social equity status is the only way that you're going to get a license. So then all you have to do is define social equity status. And that goes to Michael's earlier point. And this is actually where I will start going into the takeaways. The first of 5 takeaways that I'll try to give you is define social equity, right? If you're looking at this problem and saying, here's an industry that had much higher incarceration rates. I mean, let's just go even further back. Here's an industry that was started in 1929 by Harry Anslinger, who said, marijuana makes the Negro feel empowered enough to talk to white women, and marijuana makes reefer madness, these darkies coming up from the South, aka Mexicans. So criminalization of marijuana and everything that you think you know about marijuana and reefer madness was intentionally put in your mind by a racist politician named Harry Anslinger. Okay, so starting there, let's start there with the definition of social equity. And if you meet the Harry Anslinger test, then you should be social equity, right? Let's talk about that. So no disrespect to veterans. We love our veterans. We appreciate our veterans. No disrespect to elders, to seniors, to people who live in these gentrified zip codes, to all of these other things that have polluted the definition of social equity. You have an industry that is 98% owned by old white men who have never spent a day in prison. And you have folks that are still in prison. Social equity was meant to solve that. So step number 1, make sure that your jurisdiction defines social equity in that way. Number 2, your jurisdiction has to eliminate the red tape. Anything that takes as long, that takes over a year or 2, certainly 2 years. I mean, again, how long can we hold expensive real estate? Real estate is not cheap. And if your jurisdiction requires you to have a property lined up, that's going to benefit some landlord somewhere. If your jurisdiction requires you to jump over a bajillion hurdles, that's going to, any time inherently favors deep pockets. And so we have to, number 2, eliminate red tape. Number 3, we have to solve for, and I'll give Oakland credit again, we have to solve for access to real estate. Man, one of the saddest days in my real estate career overall, and it merges with my cannabis career. I met a young man in Los Angeles, good friend of mine now, named Bryant Mitchell in 2017. And Bryant Mitchell has an MBA from Florida A&M. He worked at Accenture. This brother is way smarter than I am and is a very talented brother, and built a very legal cannabis business and went to rent space, and landlords would not lease to him. And I said, Bryant, you're lying to me. You're lying to me. You meant the landlord didn't like cannabis. He said, no, man, the landlord didn't like Black people. I was like, how do you know that? He's like, because there's a bunch of other cannabis tenants in his building. I'm in the building now. The way I got in the building, I sent my white realtor in with the check for the earnest money. He was the straw man. He got the keys. The landlord realized what I did, and the landlord was pissed. And I was like, damn, are you telling me a story from Alabama in 1969? And he said, no, Erik, I'm talking about Los Angeles, California in 2017. There is still discrimination going on every single day in every single part of this country, where folks who look like us just don't have as much access to real estate and equity as we deserve. So I think you have to make access to real estate part of the equation. That's the thing I'm most proud of that we've done at Oak Funds. And the city of Oakland enabled us to do that by creating the incubation programs that mean that somebody else, either your landlord or your MSO partner, has to pay your rent for 3 years. They have to provide your security costs and a few basics. I mean, alone, that doesn't make a cannabis business, but it sure as heck helps. So I think having jurisdictions help solve for access to real estate. Number 4, solving for access to capital. A $5,000 grant is not going to cut it. And so the states are collecting millions of dollars of tax revenue that should not be going into the police budget. Are you out of your mind? A state is collecting revenue and then putting it back into the police budget. That money needs to be going back into reinvested into equity, meaningful amounts of equity capital and grants. City of Oakland, again, I'll give them kudos where kudos is due. You asked how much a license costs. I think in the state will charge you, it's a sliding scale depending on the size of your business, but dispensary license at the state level is $50,000. City of Oakland level, I want to say was $79,000, because our business is 50% owned by a formerly incarcerated African-American man who lived in that police beat, who was abused by the Oakland Riders police gang. They eliminated our fee altogether. So MSOs, you get to pay $79,000. Equity businesses pay $0, right? And that $0 transcended just not even the permit fee, building permit fees, fire inspection fees, almost every fee the city of Oakland waived, which is better than it going into the police budget. And it's not as good though as taking tax dollars from these businesses. I would not encourage. Remember that social equity, it's not social buyout, it's not social freebie. The partnerships need to be based in equity, but they also need to be based in the realities of when you give me $1 million of stock in your company, or if I own $1 million of equity in a business, but you tell me I can't sell it for 10 years, yet MSOs are trading. MedMen sold this to Sin, sold this to so-and-so. Those cats have made money 10 different times. And the social equity partners are over here like, well, maybe in 9 years, I'll be able to get paid. Like, So we have to find a way. I mean, look, I'm torn on that one though. And I love Mike's opinion, because if we don't put some protections in, then the MSOs are going to take advantage of you and say, here's a cheeseburger and $5.
Yep.
But if we say you can't ever sell it, then we have a different problem. Like, and so I think, in the case, like you mentioned, Michael, somebody saying, here's $10 million. Okay, great. Let's talk about $5 million in cash and $5 million in stock. I can take the cash. I can do what I need for my family, and I can take the stock, and I'll be an equity holder in some big publicly traded company. That's equity, right? So that's my 5 takeaways. I'm sorry that took so long, but turn it over to Mike.
And that's asking for what you need again. I listen, you guys don't know that my ears are up, because men do it better. That's it. I'll say it. So I've been paying attention. I pay attention closely, and I hope that there's no women who are offended by that statement, but asking for what you need, right? And making sure that what you need sort of meets those goals, right? So I love that. Thank you. I'm taking away from that. I appreciate it. And then so we'll get to the end, but Mike, I'd like to know if you have anything to add to that. What would you like to change? Or are you just gonna dip out, or what's next?
No, I'm still working here. I got my hands in a lot of things behind the scenes, whether I get my dispensary licenses or not. I mean, again, this is the very first round in Illinois. So there's a lot more opportunities out here. I just wanted to make 2 points, clarify 2 points. One, I'll throw the state of Illinois a bone and say that the one thing that they did get right was for the dispensary round, you did not have to have the real estate. So that's the good part. For the dispensary round, for the cultivation, for transportation, and for infusion, you did. But for dispensary round, you did not have to have the real estate already as part of your application. So that was good. And then, I'll just leave it on that. I think that there's a lot of work that can be done. I know what I was going to say about how much did it cost. So it cost $2,500. That was the application fee. So I put in 10 applications, that's $25,000, right? But that doesn't put in what it costs to actually write the application, because Illinois' application was very detailed. And I was quoted from different consultants who had done this work before, quoted to for them to write my application anywhere between $50,000 and I heard as much as $200,000, right? There was a dollar amount assigned to my application cost that my partners wanted to do, I guess, for their books, right?
Right.
The cost, the value of my application was $150,000. That's what they valued my application is. Just the paperwork it was 600 pages and it's worth $150,000. Just the paperwork. Oh, yeah. So that just gives you an idea. Like, yeah, it's $2,500, but and I scored 95% on my applications too. So I got that again. I didn't get the veteran points, and I missed like 1 or 2 other points or something really small. But that just gives you an idea of what the competition is like. It cost $150,000 for my application.
That I mean, we could have maybe the next one is like the cost, right? Because that is a barrier in itself, right? Because even 2,500 is a lot, but I recognize that when thinking about that number, some folks might say not too bad, but you put in 10 applications. Imagine the folks who could afford to put in 100 applications, right? Because
who could afford and was allowed to,
and was allowed, right? And it happens. But we're at our time. I've been thinking this the whole time. Will you name the dispensary Weed Food Travel? I think you should.
No, that is the product line.
That is the product line. Okay. I love it because I love what you've created with Weed Food Travel, and the same with Rosemary Jane. They're both brands that really speak to me and speak to sort of my cannabis lifestyle as a woman, as incarcerated, and then as my enjoyment, right? Like I love your food just every time. Love it. So thank you both. Thank you both for your time. Please, because I just dropped your brands, let us know where to find them.
Yeah, no, I want to be like Mike. Everybody loves weed, everybody loves food, everybody loves travel. So I think that's brilliant, Mike. Weed Food Travel is it. Rosemary Jane, we just actually opened up our very first store. Evelyn and I will be there next week. We've got some cool partnerships going with Last Prisoner Project, with Women's Prison Association and others. We're really the first ethos-driven. Nobody in Maine is talking about social equity and social justice, and Rosemary Jane is. So Portland, Maine. I thought our first store was going to open in Oakland, California, but 3 years later, it's still not open. We're close, but all that red tape I talk from experience there. And so we actually got a store open in Maine in 6 months. It's still taking us 3 years in Oakland, but we're open in Portland, Maine, literally as of today. Our grand opening event is next week. We've got a call to action. Several state representatives are going to join us at that, and we are pushing Maine to talk about automatic expungement. So go to rosemaryjane.com. Kudos to our Maine team, Yana and the ladies that are running that business. Ella, Yana, if you're watching, what's up? Evelyn and I will see you soon. And then we'll be opening up a couple of stores, 2 in Oakland, 2 in San Francisco. One of these days when the red tape goes away, Lake Merritt, we should get open by the end of the year. If we get about a dozen more sign-offs from a dozen more bureaucrats or something. So look for us in California and in Maine. And we'd love to expand our group economics model across the country. And so we're talking to partners in New Jersey and in a few other places. I really want to, I know we're over time, but if you guys will, let me drop one other thing, and then I will go. But we talked about real estate. We talked about value and cost, and we talked about, asking for what you want. And I really want to give a shout out to, first off, acknowledge that Illinois did decouple real estate from the process, because holding and carrying that real estate is freaking painful. And you talk about on top of the license costs and everything else, real estate costs, and I'm a landlord and I know it's painful. So kudos to the states that have done that. But I do want to give a shout out, as I mentioned, New Jersey, and knowing your worth, knowing your value. There's a young woman there named Precious Osagie Arase, who has been at the forefront of leading activism for social equity in that market. She owns a company called Roll Up Life. And Precious said, look, all you MSOs that want to talk, we can talk, but I know my value. To Evelyn's point, I know that the access the state of New Jersey has given me to the front of the line is worth millions of dollars. And if you're going to invest in my company, you're not going to invest at peanuts. You're going to invest at my valuation. So kudos to her. And that's kind of the takeaway. As a social equity entrepreneur, it does suck that, Michael, obviously, I think politics impacted your lottery app. I mean, we'll see what happens there, and hopefully you're able to find some recourse in the lawsuit process. I don't hold my breath for lawsuits, but certainly hope that you're able to do that. But for the social equity folks who win, don't give it away. Make sure you know your worth. And when those folks come in and talk to you, you're doing a deal on your terms at that point, and taking the real estate out of it. It's not the landlord's terms. It's not the investor's terms. You're holding that lottery ball or that ticket. So thank you, Evelyn, for having me. And thank you, Mike, for the chat, man.
Thank you. Mike, where do we find Weed Food Travel?
Yeah, it's Weed Travel Food. Yeah, weedtravelfood.com everywhere. WTF, yeah, Weed Travel Food everywhere. And you can find me, Michael Malcom, everywhere. I just want to say salute to you, Erik. Again, man, you need to be running for office somewhere because
Yeah.
when you speak, I'm like, yeah, man, talk that shit. Like,
We
no,
say that all the time.
and congratulations too. I know it's a super exciting day with it being your grand opening. So congratulations. I know that's obviously I know it's a long road travel for sure. And same to you, Evelyn. I love everything that you do, and so happy to see your journey, and feel fortunate just to be able to follow along and see as you go through. I can't wait to see what you both have going for it. And I want to go out to Maine. Never been to Maine, so now I got a reason to.
Right now, I'll send you the date.
All right, let's make it a thing.
Yeah, next Thursday, you're invited, man. We'll see you there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so thank you everyone. I will take a moment to thank LPP for hosting this conversation. To stay in touch, please visit lastprisonerproject.org, sign up for the newsletter. If you are someone negatively impacted by this war on cannabis, please go to our Reentry resources and tap in with us there, because we have lots of educational opportunities, scholarships. We have a network of folks who want to help, and also grant options to get you started, not in business, but in life, right? We've got to start somewhere. So please tap in lastprisonerproject.org, and thank you again. And I'll return your Fridays to you. Happy Friday. That's a new emoji. Did you see it? I seen it on the news. All right.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Love you. We'll talk soon.
Bye.